Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. Today we've got another of our daily Pride Month deck techs. This is deck number 9 and it's titled Transatlantic Railroad. And if you missed the first few episodes of this, what we're doing is making a commander deck for Magic the Gathering using 2 non-partner commanders, working with a budget of $100 or less, and using this as a way to celebrate the diversity of the LGBTQ+ community for all of June through the use of Magic the Gathering. So today, our 2 partner commanders are going to be Alesha, who smiles at death, and Yuma, Proud Protector. Now, if you don't know too much about these characters in the lore of Magic the Gathering, as far as I'm aware, Alesha and Yuma are 2 of the more prominent trans characters in Magic. I don't believe they're the first. We will get to that later on this month, but they are at least some of the more prominent characters. So with that being said, we do have Alesha, who's 2 and a red for a 3/2 legendary creature human warrior. She has first strike, and whenever she attacks, you may pay either a white-black. If you do, return target creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. And so her partner, in this case, is going to be Yuma, Proud Protector, 5 red, green, white for a 6/6 legendary creature human ranger. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each land card in your graveyard, and whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, draw a card, and whenever a desert card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, create a 4/2 green plant warrior creature token with reach. So this deck has a bunch of different colors for it because we have every color but blue. And so let's break down some of our themes for this deck and kind of figure out what exactly we're trying to do. So our very first theme is going to be deserts. Because Yuma really cares about deserts, and because Alesha cares about getting cards out of our graveyard, we may as well lean pretty heavily into that with cards like Hazazon, Shaper of Sand, which is red, green, white for a 3/3 legendary creature human warrior. He's got Desert Walk, you may play desert lands from your graveyard, and whenever a desert enters the battlefield under your control, create 2 1/1 red, green, and white sand warrior creature tokens. So this allows us to kind of filter deserts in and out of our graveyard and put ourselves in a position with Yuma where we can put the lands in, make some plant tokens, and then get them back with Hazazon and make some warrior tokens. Now, obviously, that doesn't work incredibly well with Alesha, given the fact that Alesha cares about creatures. So, something else we can do to make sure that the deserts get into our graveyard and make sure that Alesha gets a little bit of boost as well is, of course, self-mill. So our second theme revolves around cards like Stinkweed Imp, which is 2 and a black for a 1/2 imp. It's got flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature. But honestly, and most importantly, it has Dredge 5. So if it's in our graveyard and we would draw a card, we can instead mill ourselves for 5 and put the imp into our hand. This is incredibly useful to fill up our graveyard with lands that we could get back with Yuma or with Hazazon, and it's also useful to put creatures into our graveyard and get them back with Alesha. So we're able to kind of play this game where we can ramp using our graveyard, we can sneak creatures into play using our graveyard, but of course, we gotta fill the graveyard first. Now, our final theme, since we're returning all of these things to or from our graveyard and we're kind of just sending things to the yard and then getting them back, and especially trying to get lands back, we may as well play around with landfall. And to that end, we have Reckless Pyro Surfer, which is 1 and a red for a 2/2 human scout. It's got haste and landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, Reckless Pyro Surfer gains Battle Cry until the end of turn. It is worth noting Battle Cry can trigger separately if there are multiple different Battle Cries on one creature, so that is why landfall is going to be important here. But The main goal with this is, of course, to get as many lands out of our graveyard as possible, kind of pump up our creatures that have landfall, and then since we also have Alesha, we can sneak in some creatures from the graveyard as well. Especially because you'll notice, other than Hazazon, Stinkweed Imp and Reckless Pyrosurfer are both cards we could get back with Alesha. So I tried to lean pretty heavily into cards that cared about lands while also being 2 or less power. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our themes for today, and the next piece of our deck tech is to talk a little bit about some key cards. And these are cards that are win conditions or value engines, but they're really just kind of the MVPs of our deck. So starting off, our first key card is the Necrobloom. Again, a creature with 2 or less power so that Alesha can get it back. But it is 1 white, black, green for a 2/7 legendary creature plant. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/1 green plant creature token. If you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token instead. And land cards in your graveyard have Dredge 2. This is overwhelmingly one of the best cards in the entire deck, because not only does it have a landfall trigger, meaning we can get a ton of tokens, but it's a 2-power creature that we can get back with Alesha, and it gives all of our lands in our graveyard Dredge, so we can continue to fill our graveyard with cards and get lands back. This really is everything we want to be doing with this deck, so the Necrobloom is a perfect fit. Moving on to our second key card, this one is going to be Desert Warfare. And Desert Warfare is 3 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever you sacrifice a desert, and whenever a desert card is put into your graveyard from your hand or library, put that card onto the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. Then, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 5 or more deserts, create that many 1/1 red, green, and white Sand Warrior creature tokens. They gain haste. So this kind of allows us to cheat on mana. We can ramp out a bunch of deserts if we sacrifice them, or if we mill them or discard them. We just get to put them back into play. And then since we're so heavily focused on our desert package, this will let us make a ton of different warriors every single turn that now have haste and can immediately start attacking. And we also have ways to make other tokens and deal other damage. And of course we have Alesha to bring back other creatures. So this really just kind of accelerates the game plan at a tremendous rate. And then finally, our last key card is going to be Samut, Vizier of Noctamoon, which is 1 red-green for a 2/3 legendary creature human warrior cleric. She has First Strike, Vigilance, and Haste, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, if that creature entered the battlefield this turn, draw a card. This is one of those cards that doesn't initially look very powerful with what we're doing, but we have a ton of ways to give haste in this deck. We have Alesha to bring creatures in, so it's almost always assured that Samut's gonna draw us at least 1 card a turn, and most likely more. And if she's drawing us 1 card a turn for a 3-mana 2/3 First Strike Vigilance Haste, that's already pretty solid. Plus, of course, she's got that magical 2 toughness, so she's able to just get brought back with Alesha. That, though, brings us to the end of our key cards section, and the next thing I want to do is take a look at some cool interactions. These are cards that really synergize together, and in a lot of cases are fun cards that I just want to highlight. So the first pair of cards that I would consider a cool interaction are Dune Chanter and Cataclysmic Prospecting. So Dune Chanter, 2 and a green for a 2/3 creature plant druid. It's got reach, lands you control, and land cards you own that aren't on the battlefield are deserts in addition to their other types. Lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and you can tap it to mill 2 and gain 1 life for each land card milled this way. this card is, once again, like we talked about with Necrobloom, kind of just perfect for our deck. Turning everything into deserts is incredibly powerful. Making sure that we can tap for mana of any color with our lands is incredibly powerful. Again, a reminder, we are a 4-color deck, so that's going to be super important. Plus, it also just mills cards, which is incredibly powerful. So Dune Chanter just really does everything we want it to be doing. However, for this cool interaction, we are focusing on that first ability that turns all our lands into deserts. And that is relevant because of Cataclysmic Prospecting, which is X red for a sorcery. Cataclysmic Prospecting deals X damage to each creature. For each mana from a desert spent to cast this spell, create a tapped treasure token. So if we say do 2 damage to each creature, so just X equals 2, we've spent 4 mana, that doesn't kill our Dune Chanter, which is pretty relevant here, and we've spent 4 mana from deserts, meaning we would get 4 treasures. So we really just made all of our mana back, which is pretty powerful in its own right, but it also can clear out any pesky creatures, anything that's getting in the way, and if we have Dune Chanter, even if we do wind up killing it with the Cataclysmic Prospecting, it would still see that all of our lands were deserts when we cast the spell, and would still make us those treasure tokens. Moving on though, to our second cool interaction. This one is between Nantuko Cultivator and Aftermath Analyst. So Nantuko Cultivator is 3 and a green for a 2/2 Insect Druid. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard any number of land cards and put that many +1/+1 counters on Nantuko Cultivator and draw that many cards. So if it comes in and say we have 5 lands in our hand, we can discard all 5 lands, we get to draw 5 cards, put 5 +1/+1 counters on the Cultivator, and at that point it was kind of just a 4 mana 7/7 that let us essentially wheel our hand, discard and draw that many cards. The most important part of why we want the Nantuko Cultivator though is Aftermath Analyst, which is 1 and a green for a 1/3 Elf Detective. When it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards, and most importantly, you can pay 3 and a green and sacrifice it to return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This is the best way we have in the deck to ramp out a ton of lands, because if we can just pitch a ton of lands into the graveyard, get them all back, we can trigger all of our landfall effects multiple times in one turn, we can get a ton of plant tokens with Yuma, it may help us get a lot of value out of tokens and things like that, so this is definitely a way that we can win the game very, very quickly. That, though, brings us to the end of our cool interactions, and just about the end of our deck tech. So the last thing I want to do is talk about the price of this deck. And today, our deck came in at $51.19, with the most expensive card being Seasoned Pyromancer. And Seasoned Pyromancer, $7.57 for 1 red 2/2 Human Shaman. When it enters the battlefield, discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. For each non-land card discarded this way, create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. And 3 red, exile Seasoned Pyromancer from your graveyard, create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. So Seasoned Pyromancer is one of those cards that I try to put in a lot of decks because it has a very powerful looting ability, just being able to throw away cards and then get cards back, and being able to make elementals, and the fact that we can still use it from the graveyard. With all that being said though, while I do think this is a very powerful card, it's not necessarily, necessary to our deck. The main reason it's here is because it has that ability from the graveyard, and it has an enter the battlefield ability with 2 power, so Alesha can get it back as well. We can pitch other lands or other creatures and get those back. So I do think it's very good in the deck, but if you need to trim on budget, you can certainly cut out the Pyromancer. But that is the end of our deck tech for today. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all to all of our patrons and channel members for all of your support. If you are interested in joining that group of people, you can of course find us over on Patreon, patreon.com/dungeonlearnersguide, and right here on YouTube as a channel member. So once again, thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this, please do actually like the video and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that we're doing some awesome things here. Other than that, I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all have a wonderful Pride Month, and I will see you all on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.